so far, I have a lot of interviews. I mean, I think Ilan Pappé is probably the only Israeli that I have here. So, and he's a historian who lives in England now.
Right.
You know, can you describe Israeli culture, Israeli people, and Israeli politics for me, for us?
Yeah. For years I was asking myself what really happens to these people. Because we are not dealing with monsters. Israelis, in many cases, are sending rescue missions to any catastrophe in the world. Will it be floods in the Philippines or earthquake in Turkey or in Haiti? Israelis are always the first to be there. First to build a field hospital. You can't say the Israelis are people without values, or all the Israelis are immoral people. And here it comes that when it comes to the Palestinians, different game, different rules, different morality. And it took me some years to realize that it's all an outcome of an ongoing process, very systematic, of dehumanizing the Palestinians, which enabled the Israelis to feel good about themselves, to feel moral, to feel even Democrats. While when it comes to the Palestinians, they behave so differently. I can tell you with a deep conviction that almost any Israeli, will he be left or right or center, any Israeli does not treat the Palestinians as equal. If you scratch a little bit under the skin of any Israeli, you will find this feeling of superiority, this deep feeling that we are the chosen people, this deep feeling that the Palestinians are not human beings like us. And this enables any kind of behavior. Because the terrible thing is not what the Israelis are doing. The terrible thing is what the Israelis feel about themselves. Would they do those terrible things? I mean, peoples did much worse in history. But at least they were not so happy about themselves, so content about themselves, so proud about themselves like the Israelis.
No?
I don't think. I think that people in history, peoples who did, I mean, I guess when the Belgians were massacring in Congo, I guess they were not proud about it. They didn't feel they are doing something so normative. They knew something is wrong, while the Israelis don't think they are doing anything wrong, on the contrary.
I noticed from reading your work, what it does, it humanizes me and breaks my heart at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how would you describe what you're doing? If you have a plan or an agenda,
Yeah.
you know, what is it?
It's a very simple one. It's doing any effort that I can do, which is a very modest effort, to prevent the Israelis the luxury of saying we didn't know. I think that the entire Israeli media is enabling the Israelis not to know, to feel very good about themselves, to feel very moral. And I'm trying to break this pattern with a desperate try, first of all, to rehumanize the Palestinians, which are so dehumanized in Israeli media, and to try to tell the Israelis the story that they don't like to hear about what's going on in their backyard, which is half an hour away from their homes, and they've never been there and have no interest in knowing what's going on there. So altogether, what I'm trying to do is to document the occupation, first of all, for the Israelis. And I'm much more concerned about the Israelis rather than the Palestinians. I'm trying to write about what we are doing, not about the victim, but about this one, those one who are responsible for the sacrifice, for the victim, for the pain, for the suffer. this what I do. It's a journalistic mission. It's a mission which is ungrateful because there is not much demand for it in the Israeli public opinion. But I'm doing it for so many years, so maybe it has some kind of accumulative value, and maybe it's all for the archives. But this is the mission I took upon myself.
First of all, for me personally, I see that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is at the heart of all Arab problems in terms of identity, and I think it used to be Israeli-Arab conflict, and I don't think it is anymore. I think it's Israeli-Palestinian.
Sure.
You know, how did that shift?
First of all, I'm not sure it's totally shifted. I mean, I still think that for the entire Arab world, the Palestinian problem, and it is the Palestinian problem, it's not the Egyptian problem, so the Syrian problem, finally it is the Palestinian problem, but still it is something very emotional for most Arabs in the world. You might even see the coverage. Take Al Jazeera, for example, which is the most popular media in the Arab world. It focuses on the Palestinians more than on anything else, I believe. This because the Arab world is still very focused on it, rightly so, not rightly so. This is, I think, the big stain in the past of the Arab world. Some of the Arabs feel guilty for it. Others feel maybe responsible. In any case, when a Palestinian child is humiliated in Gaza, I guess any Arab parent anywhere feels it very emotionally. It's not like a Chechen child being tortured in Chechnya. It is still a member of the family. And I think on the emotional level, the Arab world is still watching the Palestinian fate in a very close eyes, very caring eyes, even though it's not translated many times into political language. As we know, politically, the Arab world did very little for the Palestinians. But it's one thing, the political, cynical world, and the other thing is the popular sentiment. I think the popular sentiment is still very deep with the Palestinians. Having said this, let's also remember that in many places they are not very welcome. People might care about their destiny, but in many Arab states, as you know, Palestinians are really not welcome.
I mean, for me, there's a big difference between Arab states and the Arabic people.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sure.
What I see in terms of Arabic people is, at least if I start with myself, I have avoided looking at what's going on because it's too painful to look at. I have allowed to look now and learn only recently when I discovered a medium by which I can do something. I realized I can do it through music, and now I realize there's cameras. That most everybody that I know through my circles feels silenced, feel there's nothing that they could say that would make a difference. And I mean, just like you felt ashamed about what Israelis were doing to the Palestinians, when I look at what's happening to the Palestinians in Lebanon, in the camps, not being allowed to work, I certainly don't want to even call myself a Lebanese. You know, I mean, to a certain extent, growing up in the Civil War, the whole idea of being an Arab broke down. You know, there has to be corruption throughout the Arab world to allow this going on, because Lebanon cannot support financially such a war. You know, we used to call ourselves Arab Jarab. You know, I'm not sure if you've heard it. You have, yeah?
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, do you see, now that I find for a medium for myself, I'm beginning to learn a little bit about resistance throughout the world, you know. I'm not sure if you've heard of Mazen B. Qusmiya. Qumsiya. He's writing about basically that Palestinians resist every day through just being there and by going to school. What kind of resistance have you seen?
Oh, I saw any possible way of resisting, from a violent one, an active one, to a passive one, from the sumud, this desire to stay on the ground, to stay on the land, not to give up, into political activity. I mean, you name it. The Palestinians really tried everything and failed with everything. This must be said. They have some achievements throughout the years. They have been recognized. They became a world issue, a world problem. This is quite an achievement. And still they couldn't translate those achievements into improvement in their daily life, in their situation, in their conditions, in their self-determination. They're still in the same place. Let's not forget it, that if you look backwards, you might think that the Palestinians got many achievements. Not at all. The situation is today as bad as it was 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 40 years ago, and maybe 60 years ago.
I mean, to me it looks much worse. I mean, the West Bank...
In many ways it's worse. It's worse in many ways. In others it's not worse, because at least the world recognized the problem. This was not the case 30 years ago. Nobody in the world cared about the Palestinians 30 years ago. Today it's a world issue. This is an achievement. In any political discussions anywhere in the world, the Middle East comes up as one of the main topics. So this is an achievement. And this is mainly thanks to Yasser Arafat, who succeeded to put the Palestinians on the international agenda. The next step was not taken.